We all know about the heartbreaking losses of icons like Eazy-E, Tupac, and Biggie, but there were plenty of other gifted rappers who were taken way too soon, whether from drive-by shootings, betrayal by their own people, or just flat-out senseless violence.
First, with the Scott situation, that was an assassination.
These were artists on the verge of blowing up, yet their deaths barely get the recognition they deserve. Let's take a look at their stories. Robert L. Johnson Jr., known to the world as Kilo G, was one of the earliest voices to echo out of the New Orleans rap scene. As one of Cash Money Records' very first signees, his impact was quiet but undeniable. His debut album, The Sleepwalker, dropped in 1992 while he was still just 15, a bold, dark, horrorcore-influenced project that made him stand apart from his peers. His lyrics carried an eerie maturity, full of reflections on death, fatherhood, and regret.
Kilo was Cash Money's very first artist.
It was almost as if Kilo sensed the clock ticking on his own life, using music as a way to leave his truth behind before time ran out. That time came early in the morning of January 15, 1997. Kilo was staying across the river from New Orleans, on the West Bank in Algiers, in an apartment with his girlfriend Lakeisha and their baby son. Around 4 a.m., the night was split open by a simple knock at the door. Kilo got up to answer it. Lakeisha stayed in bed, thinking nothing of it. In moments, her world unraveled. 3 shots rang out. Kilo was hit in the chest, in the side, and once fatally in the face. He staggered outside the apartment, collapsing just outside the doorway as Lakeisha ran to him. Even dying, he thought only of her and their child, struggling to lift a trembling hand and tell her to stay back, afraid the shooter might still be there and come for her too.
But then Kilo G ends up getting shot and killed.
Yeah, I think he was murdered at his house.
Detective Charles Watkins arrived to find Kilo still breathing but drowning in his own blood. He tried to speak, but the damage was too great. Watkins kept asking who shot him. Kilo couldn't answer, his airway closing with every second. Minutes later, he was gone. He never made it to the hospital. Rumors spread that Kilo had been pushed out of Cash Money just before they signed a landmark deal with Universal. The label never paid public tribute. No shout-out, no memorial. Hubert Kyle Church III, known as Mr. C, was a pillar of San Francisco's rap underground. As a member of RBL Posse, he helped carve out the gritty, raw sound that made the Bay Area impossible to ignore in the 1990s. The group had just hit a major milestone, signing a deal with Big Beat/Atlantic Records in 1995. They were about to go national, but Mr. C never got to see the next chapter. On January 1st, 1996, in the Hunters Point neighborhood, less than a mile from his family's home, violence came crashing into his life. It was broad daylight when a gunman approached him and unloaded with a 9mm pistol, firing 9 shots at close range. The bullets ripped through his body, hitting critical organs like his heart, lungs, and liver.
As soon as I pull up, I see it in my mom's face. She came outside, and I just knew it was gonna be bad. No, she's like, "You gotta get back over there. Mr. C just got shot." I'm like, "What?" She's like, they say Mr. C outside and he just got shot.
I guess the guy with the mask ran up on him,
Yeah.
and then just shot him.
The attack wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was deliberate. Someone wanted blood. But the cruelest part of the story is that the streets whispered that Mr. C wasn't even the intended target. He was caught in the crossfire of someone else's beef, killed over a problem he had nothing to do with.
It was 2 other shootings that happened before that. So one, just like they picked Mr. C, they did actually, but he didn't have nothing to do with nothing. So he really was a victim.
His death left a hole in the community, both personally and musically. Friends described the loss like getting punched in the gut, sudden, brutal, and impossible to make sense of. Strangely, despite the violent nature of his death and the fact that it happened in public, coverage in the local press was minimal. No suspect was publicly named. The case faded into silence. Edgar Givens, better known as Pimp Daddy, was one of the earliest architects of New Orleans bounce music. Charismatic and flashy, he brought a new energy to the local scene and quickly cemented himself as a regional heavyweight through Cash Money Records. With his album Still Pimpin', the young artist looked bound for bigger things.
about Pimp Daddy. He was one of the first artists on Cash Money.
Pimp was one of the first artists ever to start actually singing in his raps.
18 years old, before he truly broke out, his life was taken in one of the most talked about tragedies in the city's music history. The story of his murder starts not with music or money, but with love, a close-knit, complicated affair that spiraled into deadly territory. On April 18, 1994, in the gritty Florida projects of New Orleans, Pimp Daddy found himself caught in a love triangle that had become the talk of the neighborhood. He was romantically linked to Ms. T, a fellow Cash Money artist, and was also rumored to be involved with another female rapper, Cheeky Black. Word was that Cheeky claimed Pimp Daddy was the father of her child. That tension eventually erupted. People in the area still describe how heated it got. Angry words were exchanged, and things moved fast from there. In a flash, someone pulled the trigger. The shot came at point-blank range, not from a stranger, but reportedly from the brother of Ms. T, although some say it's actually her nephew that pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through Pimp Daddy with devastating force. There was no time for pain or even realization. He died instantly.
It was her nephew. It wasn't her little brother, it was her nephew that ended up killing him.
What made the tragedy even darker was the sad truth that despite his growing fame, Pimp Daddy was struggling off the mic. One source said bluntly, he died homeless. Though he was signed to the label that would eventually dominate Southern rap, his life ended without security, without answers, and without justice. Cash Money paid for his funeral, but nobody was ever arrested. Patrick Lamarck Hawkins, known as Fat Pat, was a legend in the making when his life was cut short. A central figure in Houston's iconic Screwed Up clique, he helped lay the foundation for the city's chopped and screwed sound. With his magnetic presence and standout singles like Tops Drop, Fat Pat wasn't just rapping, he was carving out a legacy. But just as his voice was starting to echo beyond Texas, everything ended. On February 3, 1998, Fat Pat went to an apartment complex on South Drive in Houston. He was there to collect an appearance fee from a promoter named Kenneth Weasel Watson. While his friends stayed in the car outside, Pat walked up to the second-floor corridor alone, expecting a quick exchange of cash and a handshake. But when he got there, things didn't go as planned. The promoter wasn't home. Pat turned around to leave, and then an ambush. An unseen shooter stepped out and fired a single bullet into Fat Pat's head. It was a clean, efficient kill. The bullet tore through the brainstem. There was no time for pain and no time to react. Fat Pat dropped instantly. His life was over at 27. What followed were endless theories. Rumors whispered in record stores and street corners. Some said Weasel had pulled the trigger, thinking Pat had set him up to be robbed. Others claimed Pat was killed over the money the promoter owed him. In Houston, most people were convinced. 99% of people in Houston will tell you Weasel killed Pat. Simple as that, one person said. But no matter what people believed, nothing was ever proven. No arrests were made. The case went cold. Seagram Miller was one of Oakland's rawest rap voices, a gritty storyteller tied closely with Rap-A-Lot Records. His music wasn't just hard, it was personal, drawn from the rough corners of East Oakland where he came up. But that authenticity came with a high cost. By the time he hit his mid-20s, Seagram already had enemies. Back in 1993, he barely survived after someone tried to take him out, reportedly because one of his songs had offended a powerful local drug boss. That kind of danger just came with the life he lived and the stories he told.
Do you get chased by a lot of women?
Yeah.
Why?
Probably because I rap, you know, when you rap or you do a lot of shows and you go around, a lot of girls just like because you entertain, it's not really nothing personal or anything.
But it finally caught up with him on the night of July 31st, 1996. Seagram was out in East Oakland with his friend and fellow rapper, Gangster P. The two guys had just stepped out of a van around 8:15 p.m. when chaos erupted. Out of nowhere, multiple shooters opened fire. The scene exploded into gunshots, bullets ripping through the air without warning. In an act that spoke volumes about the kind of man he was, Seagram reportedly threw himself in front of Gangster P, trying to shield his friend and take the bullets instead. Both men were hit badly. Seagram was rushed to Highland Hospital, still breathing but bleeding out fast. Inside his body, the damage was catastrophic. Massive blood loss pushed him into a fatal state of shock. His heart was racing, but his system was failing. He would have felt a deep, overwhelming panic, a crushing thirst, a sharp coldness creeping through him as his organs shut down. But he never made it through. Seagram died soon after, his body unable to overcome the massive trauma. Gangster P survived. Seagram didn't. His murder was never solved, and no one was ever charged. In the end, a rapper who once outlived bullets couldn't outrun the life he rapped about. He was only 26. A source once said Seagram was a voice cut off mid-sentence, and it couldn't be truer. His final album, Souls on Ice, came out in 1997, a year after his death. Kenneth Jackson Jr., better known as G-Slimm, was one of New Orleans' most promising young rappers in the early 90s. Coming out of Algiers, his music was gritty, authentic street life set to a southern beat. His debut album, Fours, Deuces, and Trays, dropped in 1994, and it didn't take long before people started paying attention. Locally, he was already a star in the making. And even bigger, Relativity Records, a major distributor, was circling, ready to give him the kind of deal that could launch him onto the national stage.
What's up, J-Dog? Oh, I'm at the house, man. I hope it don't be like that old bunk party last night, man. I had to go back home. There's nothing popping over there.
But his life didn't get the chance to catch up with his talent. On October 13th, 1996, everything came to a violent halt. It was early afternoon, around 1:30 p.m., and G-Slimm was outside the Christopher Holmes complex with 3 friends. Broad daylight. They were just walking, but somebody had been watching, waiting. Gunmen rolled up and, without warning, opened fire on the group. All 4 were hit, and G-Slimm caught a single bullet in the back. They rushed him to Charity Hospital, but the damage was already too deep. The bullet had pierced through and set off a rapid internal collapse. He would have felt dizzy, freezing cold inside, losing strength fast. His blood pressure would have plummeted. Everything around him would have blurred. That feeling of slipping away was swift. Soon after arriving, G-Slimm was gone, dead at 21. The most chilling part was that he'd seen it coming. He'd told his mother he was scared that jealousy over his rising fame might get him killed. He was excited about the chance to sign a major deal, but he was worried that people he knew, or people he didn't, might feel some type of way about his success. That fear became real, and nobody was ever caught. His murder, like so many from that era, is still unresolved. Charles Edward Hicks Jr., better known as Charizma, was one of those artists who was full of talent but never got a real shot at mainstream recognition. Hailing from Milpitas, California, he teamed up with producer Peanut Butter Wolf to form a dynamic hip-hop duo in the early 90s. Together, they had the kind of chemistry that could have taken them far. Witty rhymes, sharp production, undeniable charisma. But label politics got in the way. Hollywood Basic, a smaller branch of Disney, shelved much of their music due to internal disputes. So by the time Charizma was out in the world with something to say, almost nobody outside the underground scene even knew he existed.
I mean, Charizma was just fresh, like hip-hop, fully fresh. Like he had, the ill cars with the rims, he had the ill jewelry, flat top, all the ladies, money, like everything that you thought a rapper would have.
And just as things seemed like they might finally take a turn, his life was taken, abruptly, randomly, and brutally. On December 16th, 1993, Charizma was sitting in his car, waiting at a stoplight in East Palo Alto. It was just a normal day. His vehicle was parked in front of a church when someone walked up and shot him once in the chest. Just like that. It's believed the killing was either a failed robbery or, even worse, a case of mistaken identity. He was just 20 years old. The bullet caused devastating internal damage. By the time he was rushed to the hospital, his body was already shutting down. He would have lost consciousness in seconds. It was over before anyone had time to process what happened. A preacher nearby, literally watering a lawn outside the church, witnessed the shooting. Thanks to his testimony, police were able to catch the shooter that same day. But justice didn't bring Charizma back, and it didn't change the fact that his best work was still locked away on studio tapes. Cecil Allison, known across Vallejo as DJ C, was one of the pillars of the Bay Area hip-hop scene in the early to mid-90s. He wasn't just spinning records, he was building culture. Whether he was DJing for local legends like Mac Dre and Mac Mail, or just setting a vibe at a block party, people felt his presence. They also felt his kindness. Everyone who knew him says the same thing. He was a peaceful guy. No enemies, no drama. Just a gifted DJ who loved music and elevated the people around him, which makes the way he died all the more tragic. On August 29, 1995, in Vallejo, DJ C's life came to a shocking and senseless end. He was the victim of a drive-by shooting. The shots came fast, and the damage was catastrophic. He was 34 years old. Those who knew him say he never even had time to be afraid. The bullet likely caused such immediate trauma that he was gone before he could even process what was happening. But the real gut punch was that he wasn't even the intended target. Investigators later concluded that DJ C was killed because the shooters got him mixed up with another DJ, someone else entirely. It was a fatal mistake that left his loved ones stunned and the Bay Area scene in mourning. His murder remains unsolved to this day. Danny Rodriguez, better known as D-Boy Rodriguez, was one of those early pioneers who tried to carve out a lane in Christian rap long before the genre was acknowledged as anything serious. He wasn't part of the gangsta rap movement that was taking over hip-hop at the time. His music was focused on spreading positive, faith-driven messages. But despite that, his life came to a violent and tragic end in 1990, in a way that nobody saw coming, making his death one of the strangest and most tragic early losses in hip-hop. On the night he died, D-Boy was leaving his apartment in East Dallas, planning to return a movie to Blockbuster. But then he realized he'd forgotten his wallet, so he doubled back to get it. But as he pulled out of his apartment complex and made a turn near his home, he was suddenly confronted by a man, white, unknown, who walked up and shot him. Bleeding and desperate, D-Boy tried to save himself. He attempted to drive to the hospital, hoping he could get there before it was too late, but the injury was too severe. As he drove, he lost control of the car. It hit a curb, went airborne, and smashed hard into a streetlight. That impact alone was deadly. Crashing into something rigid at high speed puts the human body through forces it can't withstand. The crash delivered violence equal to a 40-ton crush of pressure on his body, causing devastating injuries, head trauma, internal organ damage, broken bones. The official cause of death was announced as the brutal combination of both the gunshot wound and the crash. What makes this even sadder is that no one really knows why D-Boy was targeted that night. It could have been a robbery, a case of mistaken identity, or something else entirely.
They say it was everything from mistaken identity to a robbery attempt, but nobody really knows.
His mother later said the real story never came out, and to this day, no one's been held accountable. Scott Monroe Sterling, better known as DJ Scott LaRock, was one of the first major figures in hip-hop to die violently, and his death was so impactful that it helped spawn a peace movement that's still remembered today. As co-founder of Boogie Down Productions alongside KRS-One, Scott LaRock wasn't just a DJ, he was a respected producer, a community-minded man, and someone who balanced street smarts with an educated approach to the world. In fact, before his fame, he worked as a social worker in the Bronx, showing a genuine desire to help people.
I'm a young black entrepreneur. I possess a business degree in management. That's it, I own my own record company. I control my own future, my own destiny.
But even with that selfless spirit, his life came to an abrupt and tragic end in 1987, just as BDP was starting to blow up. Scott LaRock was just 25 when it happened. One night in August, he and DJ D-Nice went to the South Bronx to try to defuse a dangerous situation. D-Nice had been threatened by some guys in the Highbridge projects, and Scott, being the older, more level-headed one, went along to help mediate. But things didn't go the way he planned. While Scott sat in a Jeep outside, shots rang out from a nearby rooftop.
And what happened was Scott was trying to be a peacemaker between
between D-Nice and this guy, and
things just got out of hand.
A bullet tore into the back of his head and neck, slamming him forward into the dashboard. He didn't die on the spot. He was rushed to Lincoln Hospital and held on for a bit. But the damage was too severe. His brainstem was injured, leaving him in critical condition. Even if he wasn't conscious, his body still tried to fight. But eventually, he passed away. And one of hip-hop's brightest early figures was gone just like that. 2 men were arrested and charged with his murder, but nobody was willing to testify. The streets were quiet, and the suspects walked free. Scott's death shook KRS-One so deeply that he launched the Stop the Violence movement in an effort to keep the peace in hip-hop and beyond.